We have to tell you the truth. We played a lot of this game before trying to actually make video on it, for a reason that it's actually very addictive. So be aware, if you're gonna see this video, you will probably most likely jump to Steam straight up, get this game, and literally waste a lot of time playing this game. But at the same time, I think I used the wrong word here. You're not gonna waste it, you're gonna enjoy it. Today's game is Ash of Gods. The Way is a game that is set into the world that is not connected to its precedors, but there is something cool about it. So what is exactly Ash the Way? Well, if you're not familiar with our channel, we do reviews for the games that are coming up mostly on PC, mostly on Steam, because this is the biggest platform you can find on the PC communities of the games. So if you're not familiar with us, you can check our channel and see that there is a lot of cool videos. So let's dive into the review straight up. The previous game, Ash of the Gods Redemption, was for many years one of the events that took place in the previous games. It was one of these tactical deck building games that has the combat around the player choices with influences on the story. The game literally can remind you something like Baldur's Gate, for example. But what is it exactly? And why it is so popular? It's also a good notice here if you played, for example, a game called Banner Saga, that you might be actually very close and familiar with it too. But what is it so special about the Way? Well, let's dive deep into it and understand exactly. The game has two units represented by the cards, including the attackers and supporters. Players must build the perfect deck to tackle every scenario. Deck builder games often tend to be more extremely luck-based, making the games increasingly tedious and monotonous. However, with the Ash of Gods The Way, the balance between these two is very extreme, offering a fair amount of challenging that is not impossible to win. Players need to keep their wits with both of them to play the game with their advantage. Despite being a turn-based strategy and a deck builder game, the story of Ash of the Gods The Way is great and well written. It gives the game a sense of life and drives the player to push forward for the next outcomes. The story begins in Berkana, a land that's once ravaged by the war and usually uneased peace that was forged by the Frisian legions that were kind of like subjugated and did everything wrong. Unfortunately, not much was left after the war ended. Players take the role of the Thane, once a pregnant child who was fighting and picked up and raised by Ike, his adoptive father of the source, let's say. Ike tells him a story of how the prisoners are the tactical powers and how they're preparing for another war to be trained and killing all the aristocrats that coming at commanders. And you're using here at the game. Yes. Those who can provide their tactical powerness and earn the higher ranks can make them as the commanders at the top and much greater influence among the nobility who want to win another war. However, Frisia is preparing for another war where Bekana needs more time. This is where Finn comes in. He'll have time to pick up the arms in different ways using the cards and eventually actual people for a various game of strategy and power. Ike teaches Finn the basics of the game, starting him off with a simple board and commander. The Ash of the Way is the commander that is also the fields, kind of like bringing it down to the life of opposing commanders' XP. Players start with the basic units firstly, and mostly melee types of the few range types. Each unit variants with a lot of that have the unique stats, HP, damages, stats, range, different, all of unique powerness that come from time to time. Speed and range are more complicated than HP and damage. In Ash of the Gods The Way, units advance forward by the end of the player's turns. If you can't move and advance, they'll instead attack an enemy in a unit in front of them, or just to stay where they are. Speed determines of how many blocks units can they move forward, while range is usually dependent on their weapon. For example, a Guardian has a 3 speed, while move forward 3 blocks it can, but only has 1 range, which will allow to attack. This is what you're gonna get on the next block. On the other hand, the Desert or a Duster has the 2 speed and a 2 range, giving it to the fair amount of the leeway and attacking what's 2 blocks ahead. Players need to plan ahead and stock the right type of units behind each other so they can complement each one.